Hey everyone! I'm back with another Q&A. I love doing these from time to time, just taking your questions. Thanks to everybody that submitted questions across Instagram and Facebook. I'm going to dive right in. First question, what is your advice for a 30-something just learning to play? So I've had a lot of students who began playing the cello as an adult, some of which had never played an instrument before. And this seems a little unusual because cello is often started so early and with a lot of young kids, but it's totally something you can learn as an adult so long as you are patient. All string instruments have really complicated techniques, so it just takes a long time to actually sound good. But I think for older students who are beginning on the cello, it's really important to not only be patient with yourself, but to really keep in touch with why you want to be playing the cello. Whether that means you're working towards a piece that you really love, or maybe playing something that's a little bit more contemporary, whatever drew you to the cello is a great thing to keep in touch with as you're learning, because it's going to keep you inspired and working. Also, do not underestimate the power of regular practice. So much of playing the cello and playing most instruments is about muscle memory, so as long as you're really committed to a good practice schedule, you will see results. How do you approach a brand new piece you want to learn? Sight read, figure out rhythms, find a recording, etc. So a lot of times these days when I'm learning a new piece, it's some sheet music that I've gotten my hands on, and I may have not even heard the piece before because there's so much undiscovered and underplayed music in the Baroque repertoire. So I usually try not to jump right into a recording because there's so much room for interpretation, and I don't want to hear someone's interpretation before I've gotten a chance to play through the piece, because that's going to affect how I read through it and how I interpret it myself. So usually I try to just under tempo sight read the piece, kind of work my way through carefully and technically, but it's pretty natural for me to start immediately applying musicality if that jumps out at me. Eventually I may explore recordings just to get some other ideas or hear what other people are doing, but I try to really keep it just between me and the music. Especially because of all the stuff that I do with historical performance practice, I usually have a lot of ideas of how I want to do phrases just based on things that I've studied in the repertoire. If the rhythms are particularly complex, I'll definitely put a metronome on, because when you're sight reading by yourself, it's really hard to have something sort of staying constant and making sure that you're being accurate. So throwing the metronome on when you're new to a piece can be really helpful. How does one start their career after college without going to grad school? So you don't have to go to grad school to be a professional musician in the classical world, though most people do, just because they typically want more years of studying with a private teacher, more rehearsals, more coachings, just to get even more comfortable on their instrument. If you decide to not go to grad school, you're just going to do what any grad school person would do once they were done, which is you're going to find as many different income streams as you can. So that may mean teaching lessons, that may mean taking casual gigs like wedding gigs, parties, background music, that may mean taking auditions for orchestras, that may mean forming your own chamber group. There are so many different things that you can do to start your music career, and you don't necessarily need a master's to do that. The point of getting a master's, if you're not specializing in a particular area, is just to get more time on your instrument and more time with instruction. But there's no reason you don't already have the skills to get out there and do it yourself without that degree. I realize there are various frequencies that people tune instruments to. What makes a C a C? If you have two different frequencies, doesn't that make it a different note? So pitch levels are something that are a little bit confusing, especially with period instruments and historical performance practice when we often play at different pitch levels. Basically, we calibrate everything based on A. The most common thing that we hear is that A is at 440 or 441, 442, something very close to 440 hertz for an A. So when we're talking about different pitch levels, it's all based on what the A is calibrated to. So A415 is about a half step lower than A440, and that's often what we play on Baroque instruments. But you will hear A430, which is like a slightly flat regular A, used for classical repertoire. You'll sometimes hear A392 for early French repertoire. So there are different pitch levels, and they really varied across different countries, cities, years. There was no real standardized pitch over the course of classical music, but we do our best to sort of choose based on repertoire. But just know that it's always based on what the A is calibrated to, and then every other note is just in proportion to that. Last question. If you knew about Baroque cello before, would you choose to do a bachelor's in it, or do you think it's better to do a bachelor's in modern instruments to have a more well-rounded music education? For me personally, I'm a little extremist. When I discovered Baroque cello, it was very clear to me that that is really what I wanted to do, and I got a little disenchanted with modern cello. I got my bachelor's in cello performance, typical modern cello, but by my last year of my undergrad, I was studying Baroque cello exclusively, and I did my senior recital all on Baroque cello. So even though it's not Baroque cello for my bachelor's degree, I did really choose to specialize in it before I was even done with my bachelor's. I personally wanted to go all in with Baroque music, even though I was still teaching modern lessons, but everybody's different, and I think if you do like a certain aspect of modern playing, you really should keep it around. I was told a lot that I wouldn't have a career if I didn't do both. That's not entirely true. I do teach modern lessons, but I don't really need to do much performing on modern cello, and that's just because I've created my own opportunities and I've just carved my career out the way that I like, which everybody is capable of doing. But it certainly is easier, and you do have more opportunities when you play both, even if it's just for easy gigs, simple things like that. So unless you're really, really against modern playing, it's worth it to keep it around and just try to find a way to balance, at least in the beginning of your education. Once you get further along in your educational road, then I think it's okay to specialize. Thanks so much to everybody who submitted questions. Sorry I couldn't get to all of them, but always feel free to leave your questions and I'll do my best to respond to them when I can. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you're not already, and if you'd like to help support me in the production of these videos, you can become my patron on Patreon.